All right, it's about that time when we get into the dailies, and let me introduce two of my panelists who I haven't hosted before, but I'm happy to have them in studio. I've seen at least Edwin in a report that was filed by Brian Ubuya, who we saw did the Mother story there. He's very versatile, but it was on devolution and the excesses of county government. But first, we have Jim India, political analyst. Good to have you in studio this morning.
Good to be here.
You look nice and warm.
Yeah, thank you. It's a Friday, so.
Karibu sana. And we have Ngugi Ndegwa, and he is the Executive Director, Ustawi KE. What's Ustawi about?
Ustawi is about governance, leadership, and also youth-led accountability. So it's a platform for the youth maybe to introduce themselves into governance space and to be able to voice out what they want. So youth-led accountability is what we do.
All right.
Yes.
I saw somewhere you are the chairperson of the now Kenya Youth League.
Yes.
Are you still?
I am still.
You are still?
Yes.
All right. And also in the studio, Edwin Kigoli, and he is a, let me see, you analyze policy issues, political affairs. Glad to have all three of you in studio this morning. We expect any moment now Nuruddin Hagai, advocate of the High Court of Kenya. All right, I did mention that three dailies have this on their front pages. We did look at that already. Taifa Leo, Raila Alima, balozi wa Amerika. Let me see what it says under here. Hii ni baada ya mjumbe huyo wa Amerika kusifu serikali ya Ruto kuhusu mambo mbalimbali yanayopingwa na muungano wa Azimio la Umoja. When you look at the Standard, Raila storm over U.S. envoy poll remark. A comment by American Ambassador Meg Whitman on President Ruto's poll victory draws a sharp reaction from Azimio, with Raila Odinga asking the envoy who received backing from Kenya Kwanza leaders to leave Kenyans alone. And here's a quote: "Kenya is not a colony of the United States. Keep your mouth shut. Otherwise, we shall go for a recall. She should leave Kenyans alone." The Star, she's under the ire of Raila Odinga. Why Raila is at war with U.S. Ambassador. Azimio leader calls envoy rogue, says she should shut up over 2022 poll battle with Ruto. Jim, we're conversing on this as we're taking the stories. Your thoughts?
As a diplomat, it's difficult. If she would have said that the polls were not free and fair, you'd have had Kenya Kwanza people all over the place telling her to shut up. You'd have had, in fact, the president would have even written to Biden asking her to be recalled. Now, she was on the other side and said the polls were free and fair. And of course, you expect Azimio to go on the defense as they went. Because no matter what she says, as a diplomat, as an envoy, as a foreigner, you're going to get backlash. But remember that the same opposition has been calling on the international community to intervene in the Kenyan situation. When we were out on the streets, constantly they were writing to the international community and asking them. And now you have them saying the international community should shut up. So I think one is Raila needs to decide whether the international community needs to speak on the Kenyan situation or they need to shut up. But number two, I think going by what's happening international, the geopolitics around this is there's an increase in the influence of Russia in Africa. And right now, the United States of America is trying its level best to ensure that it can galvanize all its supporters, all its allies, so that they do not turn to Russia. Remember that the president, very last minute, decided not to go for the Russia-Africa summit. And so this, in my opinion, the tone of her voice, the content of her speech was so much the United States of America appealing to the Kenyan government and saying, look, we know that Russia is right next door. We know what's happening in Uganda, for instance. And so there is a Cold War going on. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in the middle of it as a third world country, and everyone wants us to be on their side. And so it is not America's interests at this moment is to work with the government of the day. That is the interest of the American people. They cannot afford to lose an ally in Kenya. And losing an ally in Kenya means if you side with the opposition, you lose the government. If you lose the government, then the government will go to Russia. So it is expected that she should speak the way she speaks. However, as a Kenyan, I think it is unreasonable for her to make those remarks, given that we are just getting into bipartisan talks, where one of the conversations we are talking about is the elections. We are yet to resolve the matter of the election as a people. And so to make those comments, it is a slap in the face of those talks. And to say that, you know, we don't care what you guys are going to discuss, we don't care whether the servers are opened or not, we think the elections were free and fair, you guys can accept and move on.
Okay, so you view her remarks as an attempt to appease the sitting administration?
Definitely. She has to appeal to the sitting administration because Russia's influence, it's already happening in West Africa, in the Sahel region, and that fire can easily spread into the East African region. We know that Uganda has said that they don't necessarily need foreign aid. When they passed the anti-LGBTQ bill, we know that they were slapped with certain sanctions, and Uganda has readily opened up its arms to Russia. Now, if Russia gets in next door, Kenya is not far away. We've had the president talk against the dollar and saying that the dollar is not a fair currency of trade. We've had the president attack the IMF and other institutions. We've had his rhetoric on calling for Africans to build themselves and stop depending on foreigners. And so this is a very critical moment for the United States of America to tighten up its diplomacy with Kenya. Otherwise, they risk losing a very critical ally in this moment. You saw, for instance, in the South, South Africa has been leading peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. And so you do not want to lose South Africa, Kenya at this critical juncture. So I think her remarks are just to appeal to the government of the day. Her remarks are to ensure that Kenya remains an ally of the US. But as a Kenyan, I still feel offended by those remarks nonetheless. Okay.
Do you feel offended, Ngugi?
I wouldn't use the same words, but I agree with my brother because one, the US is in a tight spot. And they need maybe to endear themselves to have not only Kenya, but also other African countries. But that notwithstanding, it is also important to mention that in matters international or global politics, it is very important that we are able to understand how we play the politics of come and help us, or maybe calling foreigners to come and help us in our situations or in other crises that we face as a country. And this not only goes to Honorable Raila, who has before asked the international community to intervene, but also to other leaders within Kenya's political space. I think it's about time we should be able now to forge a path away from the from the international community. And so that is my view. So I think it will be important for the US or any other country to stay away or to steer away from matters that concern Kenyan people. And I think that is my view on it.
Edwin, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for this invite and my maiden appearance on this show. The Constitution of Kenya provides for the right of freedom of opinion. And Ambassador Meg Whitman was just living the Kenyanism in her. And that is her opinion, and it could have been guided by a number of factors, including the due process that was followed towards the validation of the 2022 presidential election. So it could have been on that premise that she said Kenyan election was free and fair. And as a diplomat of the leading democracy in the world, I believe that her statements are guided by a number of factors that she must have considered. And for Raila Odinga to come out in a devolution conference, I think for him it worked well because the message sank and everybody heard what he said. And I think as the ambassador for United States of America in Kenya, she should be alive to the political tensions in the country and the effort to mediate the crisis that is unfolding in the country in terms of, the political differences that are existing. So if she wants to build or to help Kenya build a harmonious society, she should know that such statements will cause some ripple effects in the political or from the political players. So what the ambassador said would obviously rub the opposition the wrong way, because in this country, when you talk about politics, that food is tasty to the extent that who is cooking it or who is preparing that food. So I'll only take that food if it is prepared by so and so. So this statement will sit well with government, but then again, it will rub the opposition the wrong way. But then again, she's just within her right to exercise her opinion. She can say the election was not free and fair, the election was free and fair, on a number of premises that she might predicate her judgment on.
Okay.
Olive, I think the Constitution protects Kenyans. I'm not sure about non-Kenyans, like her, whether she's also guaranteed the freedom of speech as a non-Kenyan. But you remember the title, Raila, when he started his speech, he said the title of his speech is Nyani Haoni Kundule.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
The US, up to date, we cannot, they bungled an election. Their last election was perhaps the most useless, we cannot verify the results of that election. In fact, they tried to riot at the Capitol. The then President Donald Trump tried to overturn those elections. There's still an inquiry out there.
But who could not verify? My understanding is that Donald Trump is facing charges for attempting to overturn. Yes,
so it means up to now, they are still sorting out the last election that they had. They are still trying their level best to block Donald Trump from running in the next election. And so a country that cannot run its own elections, a country that has very little record of conducting free and fair elections, so where is she bringing this that she observed? If you cannot do it in your own country, how do you make that observation in another country? That, for me, is the problem with those remarks. And that is why Raila said, Nyani Haoni Kundule. Clearly, you have a problem with elections in the US. Then you come and try and observe elections in Kenya and turn them as credible. On what grounds? Where do you get the guts to even say that?
But Olive,
I believe the freedom of speech applies to everybody, Kenyan or non-Kenyan. Your thoughts?
It should not go unchallenged. He set a very dangerous precedent. The predictability of US elections is beyond question. All right. Even after President Donald Trump was trying to interfere and manipulate the election results, it was clear who was going to be the president. Whether President Donald Trump was going to appear at the inaugural arena, the transfer of power was guaranteed. Like, the US follow the law. You, as the president, do not determine a single thing. Donald Trump, when he tried to overturn that election, you know, with the insurgency and everything that he was planning to try and subvert the course of justice in the United States of America, all institutions related were clear on what to do. There are those who said, we are not inclined to overturn the will of the people. We will declare the election results as the people have decided. So United States of America is a very advanced democracy. It is not like us here in Kenya, where if a president speaks, that is almost going to be the case. All right. So in US, a president can say, can offer an opinion or can say something, but then again, it is the rule of law, the system, that will decide what time. Because there was a time I read an article by a general who said, we are inclined to decline an order that we deem not to be in accordance with the law, even if it is coming from the president. So as the military, we can, or as the army, we can refuse to comply with an order. And that tells you how sophisticated that democracy is. Much as the president is the commander-in-chief of the military can decline to take an order if they think it is going or acting in ultra vires. So as a country, we also need to have tolerance levels. And when process or due process is done and followed, we have to respect when people come out with opinions that even we might not be very comfortable with. So when we talk about tolerance levels, we cannot say we want it to be tolerant to us, yet we cannot tolerate dissenting opinions. So we must be accommodative. So I think Raila should have taken it in good faith. And in any case, we're done with the election and we're just trying to do firefighting and talks here and there to make sure that everybody is feeling at home and having a piece of the cake. But even as we have these diplomats in the country, they should always be alive to what is happening. We are trying to bring the country into cohesion. Look at what Mandamanos do to this country. It is this US that will start to issue travel advisories to Kenya. And when they issue these travel advisories, it hurts our economic and social plans in this country. Because now when US issues travel advisories, it becomes difficult for us even to attract tourists in this country, and the economy will not be doing very well, and will be suffering the consequences.
So I need to take a look at what else is contained on the dailies. But People Daily also had the very same headline: polls, Raila hits out at U.S. envoy as new leader tells Ambassador Meg Whitman to keep off Kenyan affairs a day after she said the country had conducted its freest and most credible elections, says this will hurt Bomo's talks. Okay, so I will take us back now that we get a sense of at least what 4 of the dailies have on their front pages. Let's take a look at what the Daily Nation has for us this morning, the Business Daily and Taifa Leo. But just for the record, Meg Whitman is trending on Twitter. All right, this is the Daily Nation. BBI Season 2. The warring political factions are still haggling about the agenda for dialogue ahead of last year's presidential election. A campaign to amend the constitution fronted by Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga was resisted by William Ruto, but the Supreme Court eventually scuttled the crusade. Now the president's and Raila's factions are in talks that are revisiting some contentious issues. Interesting that this is actually the headline, because yesterday I was going through the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill of 2020, which you may know as the BBI, and I was looking, so I was just, because we are discussing devolution and whether it has cured the imperial presidency, and I was looking at what some of the recommendations or proposals that were contained therein, and I came across, leader of the opposition and all of this, and I was like, oh, these are the same conversations, entrenchment of CDF into the constitution. These are the same conversations, War Development Fund that we are having now. So this is an interesting one, and National Dialogue Committee is looking at the question of leader of official opposition. Office of the Prime Cabinet Secretary also was contained in the BBI. 9 additional counties from 47 to 56. War Development Fund, 2/3 gender rule, top up of 40 more women in the National Assembly and the Senate. BBI looked at the same, more or less, leader of official opposition, Office of the Prime Minister, 70 additional constituencies from 290 to 360. War Development Fund and their cure to the 2/3 gender rule. Each county represented by a woman and a man elected to the Senate, and special top-up seats in the National Assembly. The Daily Nation also shares, that particular story shares this on the front page. Raila warns U.S. envoy on doubling in local politics. An image there of Raila Odinga is quoted by Anne Waiguru, her deputy, Council of Governors, the Eldoret governor, and Homa Bay governor there, Gladys Wanga. Did you hear the part where Raila Odinga took on Jonathan B. on his remarks that they're busy, they've been carrying out mandamano in the farms. They haven't been wearing sufurias on their heads. And he hit back referencing the Finland scholarship controversy and saying it is on account of mandamano that we are enjoying this devolution, but we'll get more into that. Also on the front page, speaking of Finland, State wants the bank accounts of Mandago and his aides frozen. Prosecution will also pursue seizure of assets belonging to Asingishu Senator Jackson Mandago and his co-accused. Appointment: insider to succeed Nurdin Haji as DPP. President picks Renson Ingonga as senior assistant DPP in charge of Northeastern for vetting by MPs as Director of Public Prosecutions. Also on the front page, breakthrough as new way to treat prostate cancer available locally, or a highly targeted and effective option for treating prostate cancer in its early stages is now available in Kenya. We looked at the Taifa Law in passing, right? So let's take a look at the Business Daily. And this is it. Peter Kenneth, 3 firms hit with 1.1 billion shilling tax demand. This particular report by Dominic Omondi. Former presidential aspirant Peter Kenneth and 3 companies, including a bank, are the latest high-profile individuals and entities to be caught up in the ongoing tax crackdown by the Kenya Revenue Authority. The Business Daily has established that the KRA is demanding more than 1.14 billion shillings from shareholders of 3 companies, including Mr. Kenneth, for underpayment of tax paid on sale of shares. According to KRA, these shareholders paid a total of 569.9 million shillings for the sale of their shares instead of of 1.7 billion shillings, an internal document seen by Business Daily shows. So more on that on page 2, they tell us. Eyes on CBK's second deputy government. I beg your pardon, eyes on CBK's second deputy governor as Ruto picks chair. Andrew Mukite Musangi is set to become the next chairperson of the Central Bank of Kenya, leaving the vacant slot of a second deputy governor to be filled to complete the new team to run the Apex Bank under the William Ruto administration. We'll be speaking on the bank because I believe part of the proposals made yesterday, again by Raila Odinga, was for Central Bank to release monies owed to the counties without having to go through the controller of budget. Okay, let's see. Thuge warns, or without the green light thereof, Thuge warns Parliament against reviving interest rate caps on loans. The Central Bank of Kenya has warned MPs against proceeding with a bill that seeks to reintroduce caps on interest rates, arguing it will hurt the economy. LSK to self-regulate in war on dirty cash. The Law Society of Kenya said that the deal signed with the state will see them self-regulate their members in the fight against money laundering, but will keep the confidentiality of their clients. It was a big story a couple of days ago. Auditor flags 630 million shillings in NSSF dead portfolio. The Auditor General has flagged non-performing investments worth 630.3 million shillings on the books of the state-controlled National Social Security Fund, revealing assets that have either become worthless or failed to generate returns. Let us see if I missed anything on the front page of the Standard. I think I looked at pretty much everything. At the very top here, heated debate in House over marriage bill. Bank rakes in super profit. Kenya gets lab for sports. Bad news for Manago as DPP targets to freeze his cash and assets. I think I've covered everything here. When we look at the Star, have I missed anything? Okay, Siasa, political turncoats in Kenya's politics, epiphany or survival? I think I'll get your thoughts on that one. Remember Mutahi Ngunyi's sit down with the Nation? There was a back and forth. I said, hey, the violence between himself and Abdullahi, Ahmed Asir Abdullahi on Twitter, or X as it is now called. Okay, so I did look at this while Raila is at war with Azimio leader, with US Ambassador. Azimio leader calls envoy rogue, says she should shut up over 2022 poll battle with Ruto. Manago denies charges in Finland scholarships fiasco. I'll also get your thoughts on this, but on the other side of the break. Court dismisses honorable discharge for Army deserter Renson Ingonga, nominated to replace Haji as new DPP. I think that's pretty much it. Okay, so we take a break. When we come back, we get into all that and matters devolution.